Hey everyone, it's Anthony Cosenza with the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. Hope you are well and you are enjoying the rest of your week. We're coming at you live on our YouTube channel. Normally we come at you live on our YouTube channel and the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. Last week we experienced a little bit of audio issues that we felt were because we were simultaneously streaming. So we're gonna work the kinks out on that. We will be doing that going forward, but for today and this week's episode, we're only going live on our YouTube channel. And as always, I'm joined by Randall. Would he go by Randall Sheeran? Will he have a Sheeran last name, or?
I don't know. I kind of adopted him, and he's not, I guess, technically a Sheeran because he doesn't technically belong to me. I'm just kind of holding on to him for now, but he's like an honorary Sheeran. He's almost like an honorary Cosenza too.
Okay.
So you can be like in the both.
Hyphenated.
Yeah.
And
Sheeran
course,
first. Sheeran first.
Yeah, there you go. Of course, the real Sheeran, the real deal, John Sheeran is with it. John, how you holding up this week, buddy? You took some lumps from some keyboard warriors, some Twitter tough guys. How you holding up, buddy?
Just real quick, I like how we always talk about Randall the Skeleton, and like there's the people who just don't watch the YouTube show and have no idea there's a skeleton behind me. But I'm doing fine. You know, like the Bengals stink. And people are mad, and that's kind of how it goes with an 0-7 team. But it's all about perspective, man. Like life is still good, even if the team sucks. Life is fine. I can't complain.
Yeah, unfortunately, in our position, when we don't play for the team and we don't work in the front office of this team, and it's kind of a shoot the messenger thing, And you and I, we report news, but we also give a lot of opinion in our writings and on this show and all of that. So, and Bengals fans are testy, and for good reason. 0-7 to start the season. Bengals fans are testy, and they a lot of times like to kill the messenger. So, we'll give you probably a little bit of a chance to talk about to clear your name, I guess, if you want to do that towards the end of the episode. But tonight we're going to talk a ton about quarterbacks, and normally we don't like to engage too much in the Andy Dalton discussion or whatever, but right now he appears to be at a career crossroads with the team, especially with his performance against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the options currently on the Bengals bench and if they should give those guys a look. We've also been asked by a number of viewers about the guys coming in the next NFL draft class in 2020. Which guys do we prefer? Why? And might there be a different route than taking a quarterback top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in the draft? Might there be a different plan in place that could be just as, if not more effective for the team going forward next year? And then, of course, we will, because the Bengals are in London across the pond, we will be joined by Joe McAtee of Turf Show Times, the SB Nation's Rams site. Very stoked to have him on. Of course, we'll talk about the game, but I'm really curious, John, to get his insight on Zac Taylor, his insight on Jared Goff and the way he's been operating in Sean McVay's system, all kinds of different things. I'm pretty excited about that interview. I hope you are as well.
I don't want to talk about Andrew Whitworth, but I think I'm going to ask him a question about it. I'm just going to hold back the tears.
Of course. Big number 77. So we'll talk about that. We will be having another listener question show on Friday afternoon, so join us for that. Unfortunately, tonight we tried to get some members of Bengals UK. Some of you follow their accounts on Twitter and whatnot. We tried to get them on tonight, but because of the time difference, it just didn't work. But Friday, we're going to talk to them as they are live in one of the English pubs. They're going to talk about the sights and sounds with the games. They're going to join us. Pretty excited about that. They're also going to be talking with like Dave Lapham and Lance McAllister, and they're making time for us too. So pretty excited about that. So you'll want to join us Friday and/or download that listener question / Rams preview episode as well. Well, let's, I guess, dive into what happened this last Sunday. I mean, we could talk about a number of different facets, John. The lack of a run game, the dry spells on offense, the lack of a run defense, but the spotlight's on the quarterback. And the Bengals into the fourth quarter were down 17-10. And in the fourth quarter, Andy Dalton threw 3 interceptions on 3 straight drives. These interceptions, the first one was in the red zone. The second one was it a pick six? Basically, there was
pick six off a screen.
Right,
pass.
right, and then another one yielded no points. But I mean, that essentially those 3 picks could have you could view them as a 17-point swing should the Bengals have scored a touchdown on the one that he threw in the end zone, and then obviously the pick six, one turned into some points. So 3 straight interceptions, not a good look for him, especially when some fans were already calling for his head.
So before this game, the Bengals were 0-6 and 0-3 in close games. And for what this roster is right now, extremely beaten up, very weak in a lot of spots. They've more or less been in some of these games that they had no business of being in. And unfortunately, for the entire season, the quarterback position has been outplayed. In regards to the Bengals side, this game was basically no different. Going into the fourth quarter, the Gardner Minshew and that passing offense was doing nothing out of the ordinary. For the first time in a while, the Bengals defense looked pretty stout for most of the game and kept them in the game. And that's kind of been also another theme going on. While the offense is sputtering and has no sense of consistency and identity, the Bengals defense has been doing everything in their power to fight for the 35-40 minutes on average, the amount of time that they're on the field. And this game was a lot of the same of that. They gave up another 200 yards rushing just because the Jags, have those bodies on the offensive line, and they have a guy in Leonard Fournette who runs for about 100 yards after contact every single game. None of that is any different. But the Jags didn't have a lethal passing game like they had early part in the season, and they just kept the Bengals in this game. And up until the fourth quarter, they were down by a touchdown. And Dalton was struggling this entire game to find any consistency. He was only really succeeding in targeting Alex Erickson of all people. It was kind of like a rotation of which receiver in this offense has its turn to step up. And apparently Tyler Boyd, Auden Tate, and Alex Erickson can't all have a decent game all together in the same week. But it was Erickson's game to shine, and he did well, and Dalton did well targeting him. And Dalton did have some good throws to his name. But man, again, for the fourth time really this season, it was just a game that came down to the last quarter, and it just ended up with Dalton just falling under pressure, just failing to step up when they needed him the most. And this game doesn't technically count as a one-score loss because they lost by, I think, 10. But this game was just as close as the other close games that they lost. And for the same reason that they lost because of the quarterback position. And even when you have a team that has literally barely had an active roster that was healthy enough to play in this game, and injuries at a multitude of starting positions, including his number one receiver, AJ Green, this team, for whatever reason, is still being around late in these games, and they can't count on the most important position to put it away.
So we'll talk more about Andy Dalton in just a second and the quarterback stuff. I kind of want to deviate just for a quick second because you talked about the fact that the Bengals have been in these games and, inexplicably the point differential is so in my winners and losers column that I put up after the game, I actually had Lou Anarumo as a winner, and I put him in as a winner because this team had been, they were in the game. They started the game with a goal line stand, and I think 3 straight punts is what they were the first 4 drives by the Jaguars. Competent offenses, you take advantage of that and you at least get a field goal, 2 field goals, 10 points out of something like that. And on top of that, when the Bengals weren't moving the ball, they were then pinning the Jaguars deep. The Jaguars punted back, gave the Bengals decent field position, and they just weren't moving the ball. So I guess some fans didn't agree with the sentiment that Lou Anarumo, I guess, was a winner. I still kind of stand behind that because there are probably 4 or 5 games of these 7 losses where either they're one-possession games or really, I think, only a couple of those games they've led up in the 40s or huge amount of points. It's really been manageable, one-possession, 10-point type of games. And in this game, Dalton throws the 3 picks in the fourth quarter that absolutely blows up in their face. I think the defense, despite all their deficiencies, did enough to at least keep the Bengals, give them the ability to win.
Yeah, Terry Anarumo's let's just not blow this out of proportions. He's not doing the greatest job as a defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of definite deficiencies that he could definitely improve upon. With that said, going back, I think it was the first time we noticed this in the Buffalo game where the defense kind of broke down towards the end and you realize they've been on the field for 40 minutes. And that was the same thing with the Arizona Cardinals game, the Baltimore Ravens game, and now with the Jacksonville Jaguars game. A lot of those offenses had exotic running games that they just don't have the personnel to counter. And that's why they gave up over 250 rushing yards in 3 separate contests in this game. That's still what it is at this point. it's all relative to what he has to work with right now. And that defense is very battered at the moment. They don't have a lot of athleticism in the needed spots to do, but they only gave up, I think, with that Pixies, they only gave up technically like 20 points in this game, and they're not giving up a ton of points. And in the red zone, they're doing a decent job there as well. I think they have like the 4th best red zone defense in the league, which is very much overshadowed by the fact that they have, I would assume, would be a bottom 5 red zone offense. So I guess the two kind of counter out each other, and they fail to take advantage of the good red zone defense. But like you said, it's all relative to what they have to work with and how really bad the offense is. His defense is performing better than the offense right now. And our own Matt Minich, who does the Chalk Talk podcast for this channel, he wrote an article this week about this defense is good enough to win games if they have that competent offense. And it doesn't take much out of this. They don't have to be the 49ers on offense. They don't have to be the Chiefs on offense. They just need to be able to put together some drives to take advantage of some crucial stops that this defense manages to get. They play their ass off. I'm just going to say they play their ass off. They play their hearts out for the lack of depth they have at the defensive line, for the lack of talent they have at linebacker. They overachieve right now, and that's very much lost. And I know we get all lost in the whole volume yardage that they give up, but situational basis, per play basis, they're doing all right for what they have.
Right. No Carl Lawson, no Carlos Dunlap, no Kerry Wynn, no William Jackson, no Dre Kirkpatrick. I mean, it's a lot of starters and role players there who were not in the game, and they still did in my opinion, they did enough to give the Bengals an opportunity to win. And I think that's kind of where I'm at. And to your point, the time of possession is completely lopsided. Some would look at that and say, well, that's because they're letting up all of these rushing yards and these teams are sustaining drives. I see it as they're on the field a ton because the offense keeps putting them back out on the field, and the play disparities there because of that. So, I just wanted to bring that point up. But going back to Dalton, now to me, three interceptions. You're now, this game's kind of out of reach. I would have probably put one of those young guys in. I mean, is it time that this team now? Is it time? Should Andy Dalton be sitting on the bench, or is it now, hey, we're getting guys, whether it's AJ Green, whether it's maybe Dunlap and Lawson and all these guys, we're starting to kind of get guys back now. Maybe let's see what he has with some of these players back on the field.
I think I'm still in the mindset that this team needs to be in full evaluation mode. And I think from our perspective, if they put out one of the two backup quarterbacks in there, they're basically saying, yeah, we're at DEFCON 1. This season's over. We're just going through the entire roster now to see what we have. At the quarterback spot, I want the guy that gives them the best chance to evaluate the rest of the talent on offense. And if they feel that Andy Dalton is the guy to do that, to evaluate the receivers, the offensive line play, go ahead and put him out there. Obviously, he's better in the draft position right now with the way he's playing. If they put Ryan Finley out there, I don't think it's a move as a sign for them to get better results, because I don't think that they feel like Finley's a better quarterback. And I don't think that we should feel that Finley would generate better results because he is a rookie and he does have deficiencies to his own name. Yes, he has some strengths relative to Dalton's game right now, specifically with pocket presence and all this other stuff that us armchair scouts can look at. But with Finley and Dolagala, they both have traits that we would like to see in an actual game to see how well they translated from the preseason and from the college game, to that matter, all the way to the NFL. I think throwing him out there against the Rams defense, either of them against the Rams defense, is basically a lose-lose situation. Now, obviously, Dalton's going to get beaten up regardless behind this offensive line against that defense, and we'll talk more about that later. But I feel like in this specific week, going to London against one of the better defensive lines is probably a scenario for disaster to start any rookie for their first start out there. So I think if something like this does happen, it happens after the bye week, maybe not immediately, but if things continue to worsen after that bye week when they have more time to evaluate the situation, yeah, maybe we can see something like that. But I don't think it's a move to really spark the locker room and spark some type of late season push or whatever, or establish some type of winning mentality here. I think if they do that, it's just a sign that, hey, we're just giving up the season, we're seeing where we are with the quarterback position now, because more likely than not, we're going to address it in next April.
I like your sentiment about, maybe now isn't the time given the travel and the opponent and a bye week coming up. And usually if you are teams, if they make a quarterback change, it's usually around a bye week so that quarterback gets an entire, an expanded amount of time to run with the ones, to get the playbook, to really grasp a lot of things. So that I think makes sense. But to your evaluation point, I understand where you're coming from with, if Andy Dalton gives them the opportunity to properly evaluate other players, then that's what needs to happen. But some of the players that need evaluation are these quarterbacks that are on the bench. Is Ryan Finley going to be at any point a viable starter, even if it's a stopgap starter for Andy Dalton getting injured or another quarterback they bring in getting injured? You moved up, you liked him, you were the only quarterback that this team brought in the pre-draft process for a visit, so obviously they like you. To me, you may want to see what this season's done. I mean, I hate to say that. And
they're 0-7. Like,
I mean, I don't. For our ratings purposes and our viewings purposes, I guess. No. I mean, this season's it's lost. I mean, it's done. And to that point, I kind of would like to see a guy like Finley. Now, I had someone tweet at me today asking about Jake Dolegala. Maybe he's an even better option than Finley because he's got the stronger arm. He's kind of the prototypical build. He can avoid the sacks. My thing is whether it's Finley or Dolegala, if you bring him in, you have to kind of temper the expectations, because what you saw in preseason was against guys that are either on practice squads, aren't on teams, or are fringe roster guys. That's who they were playing against. So, you can't expect them to come in there and Ryan Finley, who was one of the best passers in the preseason, if he is to get a start. I think you need to temper the expectations. But like you, John, I think these next couple of weeks, you really have to kind of think about evaluating one of these guys and giving them the opportunity, because it seems that the Andy Dalton era is over.
And once you throw out Finley, or in some bizarre case Dolegala out there, you would have to admit that the Andy Dalton era is over. Like, there's no way you can convince the fan base that, yeah, we're sticking with Dalton and we're not going to draft a quarterback. That's just throwing blind smoke in there. Like, if that move is made, you know for a fact that they're targeting a quarterback early in the draft and they're targeting his replacement. And then it comes down to the fact if they're even going to keep him on the roster in 2020, or if they're going to let him play out his contract, whatever. But if things are going the way if things are going the way they're trajecting right now, it's not looking good for number 14.
It's not. I would like to see these guys, though, behind. I don't know if I want to see them behind this offensive line per se, but I would like to see a Ryan Finley behind a starting offensive line, a Jake Dolegala behind a starting offensive line with maybe some other guys, maybe an AJ Green out there to kind of see, hey, there are some starting caliber players around this guy. Maybe see what they're able to do. I was impressed with Dolegala, but let's not make a mistake. That is a project guy. He has a lot of work to do. There was a reason why he was a small school guy. There was a reason why he was undrafted. There was a lot of work to be done there, but sometimes those guys, the best work that they can get and how they end up developing is in games. So to me, I think like you, the timing going maybe into a bye week, especially dependent upon what happens this week. I think going into the bye week, that's maybe when you look at, hey, let's give one of these guys a shot.
Exactly. And even to then, like, my whole thing is that this offensive line struggles right now. Like, a lot of it has been like blaming on the pass protection. And I think week 4 really amplified that when they gave up 8 sacks. But over the past 3 weeks, they've only given up a handful of sacks. Definitely a lot better relative to how they started the year. And unfortunately, the passing game is not picked up in terms of efficiency. So it kind of goes back to, I think Pro Football Focus did a data study about if quarterback pressures are more of a QB stat or offensive line stat. And they found that on average, it's more of a QB stat. And it's more of how a quarterback manages the pocket. And if he's the one who causes, pressures and, how these pressures form, whatever, and it's more on him than the offensive line. So I think in terms of Finley, you could therefore evaluate how good or bad the pass protection really is on the offensive line. If Dalton himself and his quick release, which a lot of people say that he has, that makes the offensive line better. If you put out Finley in there, how much does he quote unquote elevate the offensive line and make them look a little bit better? There's another wrinkle to the whole evaluation process that's not only evaluating your receivers and how they fare with the quarterback, but also with the offensive line and how their overall production and performance measures up against the quarterback that may handle pressure a little bit better and doesn't cause pressure onto himself, because that's always been the main thing that Andy Dalton has struggled with. And even past then, like the other thing you have to look at is how a quarterback is able to create out a structure and how he's able to extend plays. And that's definitely not something that Dalton does well. And it wasn't something that Finley did well out of college either. So I think getting those two things, at least some sense on film this year, it would be nice for the Bengals to have to see if they would continue to further invest in Finley beyond 2020 and beyond that as either a backup or a potential, like you said, spot starter. But that would be the only two concerns I would have right now.
Right, and we've got a couple of people talking in the YouTube chat. Dustin Lenz, who I believe also was the gentleman who tweeted at me about Dolagala specifically. Rob Duncan, Dylan Burke, they're kind of saying we don't want to throw Finley in there, have him kind of hear footsteps so early in his career or what have you. Well, I understand the sentiment, but your starting quarterback is already showing those signs, so he's sensing pressure that isn't necessarily there a lot of times and isn't handling the pressure very well. And I mean, you need to kind of see how these players do handle NFL pressure. And if they're able to manage the pocket, to your point about the PFF stats, sacks and pressures kind of being a little bit more on the quarterback fault side. Again, you don't want to go and throw someone out there and, hey, go get hurt, obviously, but you draft these guys for a reason. You bring them in for a reason. You're 0-7. Your team's not doing anything on offense. I don't know. I'm kind of at the point like, why not?
Exactly.
What do you really have to lose at this point?
Like if you draft a quarterback and don't want to throw him into any slightly uncomfortable scenario, then that quarterback is essentially useless. You're essentially labeling him as a backup that can only come in a perfect scenario. And essentially you're giving him the Andy Dalton treatment where he can't be expected to do good unless he has the perfect offense line, the perfect supporting cast. You need to see how these guys perform under unperfect circumstances.
Yep.
And there's no better situation than right now.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And imperfect circumstances should be the team motto for the 2019 Bengals. That is for sure on their crest. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. We're talking about the Bengals' loss to the Jaguars as well as the quarterback situation, the current state of the quarterback situation with the Bengals after Andy Dalton threw 3 interceptions against Jacksonville. We're going to talk in just a second about some of the college prospects coming up and some strategies with the 2020 draft as it pertains to the quarterback position. We'll also be bringing in Joe McAtee from Turf Show Times, the SB Nation Rams site, to help preview this week in London and talk about some other things given the relationship between the two franchises. If you're new to this show, you can get all of our stuff. And as John mentioned earlier, Matt Minich's Chalk Talk, it's a film review, so kind of a neat thing. That's on our YouTube channel. But that and this show and a number of other episodes are on our SB Nation Cincy Jungle podcast channel. So subscribe to that. Get your podcast however you may do that, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, all that good stuff. Get it there, and all of our stuff is on cincyjungle.com, along with news, opinions, analysis, all that good stuff on the website there, so check it out. John, the other part we've been hearing a lot about, obviously, is, okay, the big 4 or 5 quarterbacks coming out in this year's draft. The Bengals have currently kind of held the number 1 overall pick. They're jockeying with, the Redskins and the Dolphins and all that good stuff. They've had it basically the number 1 overall pick for a while. It was Tua. In recent weeks, it's been more Joe Burrow. We've been asked, at least I've been asked quite a bit, who's your guy and why? So we'll start with that portion of the question. And obviously, we're looking at probably the big 5, Joe Burrow of LSU. You're looking at Tua from Alabama. You're looking at Justin Herbert of Oregon. You're looking at Eason out of Washington, and probably Jake Fromm is maybe in that conversation as well. Not maybe top 5, but in terms of a high round quarterback, those are kind of the 5 names being kicked out there. It's early. We have half a season plus yet to play. But as you sit here today in mid to late October, do you have a favorite, and what tools or what reasoning do you use in order to come to that conclusion?
So there's no, just like last year and maybe even the year before that, there's no real slam dunk number 1 right now. And that's, I guess, a rare thing. Like there's not always going to be an Andrew Luck type prospect in every draft or anything like that. And there's never going to be, there might not ever be like a Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston type 1-2 combo at the top. But I think if Joe Burrow continues to play like this right now, it's really hard to dispute him not being the best overall. And he's definitely playing the best. He's got the best metrics in terms of deep passing, play action passing. In terms of just being an LSU quarterback, he's setting records like middle of the season, which is really unheard of. And I think really bodes well for him as well. But it's so incredible to think that this guy was a backup at OSU and couldn't beat Dwayne Haskins and JT Barrett as a starter. And then even when he was a transfer starter last year at LSU, he was pretty much a pedestrian starter. And then in his last year, he just manages to flick a switch and turn it on and look like almost a perfect quarterback in a lot of the ways. He can obviously. He's a great, pocket manager, and he's able to identify different coverages and different levels of the field, and he's able to maneuver in the pocket and manipulate defenses and make accurate throws all over the field. Like I just mentioned, one of the best, if not the best, deep ball thrower in this class. And really, it's not like he has like a live arm. Anyways, it's almost like when you watch him, he's kind of like has a release and velocity of like a Carson Palmer or Ben Roethlisberger, where it's not lightning quick and the ball doesn't have a lot of pop to it, but it gets to where it needs to go, and somehow it manages to get there when it needs to be there and in the perfect spot. So great accuracy all over the field. The one area that I want to see more of as we go on and as he plays even tougher defenses late into the SEC schedule is how he can operate out of structure. Like, how can he make throws on the run? How can he extend plays? Is he able to continue keeping his eyes downfield? And those are traits that he's shown promise of to start. But again, this is still not technically a 1-year starter, but a 2-year starter that really has right now just a half year of great play, and the other year was obviously mediocre. So right now I think Burrow is playing the best, and it's hard to really argue against him, even though there are other quarterbacks, I know you're about to mention one, that might have more flashier traits that might benefit him in an offense where he's not going to get perfect protection. He's not going to get receivers who can separate all the time. So, maybe you don't necessarily knock him on that, but you think, okay, maybe there are other quarterbacks that could potentially have a higher upside or make more of the situation that he could be presented in Cincinnati. But right now, I think Burrow is the safe number one for me.
Okay. And keep in mind, probably the person I'm going to talk about, I'll get a lot of hate on this. My baby in the YouTube chat, Joe Burrow equals Mitchell Trubisky. I don't know if I agree with that one, but there's not really a wrong answer here as we sit here in talking about this. We've been asked about our preferences. We've seen what we've seen on film. We're going to watch more, especially during the offseason. And as these players have an entire season's worth of film or multiple seasons worth of film. So I like what I've seen. To your point about Burrow, I like what I've seen from him. I worry what you prefaced your statement with, the 1-year wonder thing. Like you said, he had trouble getting past some of these guys to get a starting job. He had to transfer somewhere else to get a job, and then all of a sudden looks outstanding. Is that a system thing? Is that just, he didn't get a proper look? And, sometimes guys just get overlooked. And Tom Brady is an example, right? He and who was the one guy, Drew Henson, right? At Michigan, were kind of vying for playing time there, and Brady was kind of overlooked. And then, we all know what happened there. So weird things happen to guys in college, and it just happens. But to me, the 1-year wonder thing scares me a little bit. And I think that's going to be the big knock on him coming out going forward. Now, for those who follow me on Twitter and, know of where I live, I'm partial to the kid in Oregon, Herbert. And there are a couple of reasons why. I'm looking at his stats, yardage wise, his first 2 years, not great because he didn't throw the ball a ton, but completion percentage in the mid to high 60s. Last year, if he were to come out after 2018, a lot of people thought he would be the top guy off the board. His completion percentage dipped under 60, which was alarming. And credit to him, I think he either heard or felt on his own that he had some things to work on in order to be a better quarterback, be a professional quarterback. And the Oregon team is pretty good as it is. So, maybe he thought he had a shot at a good run with the Ducks this year. But, now he's had the highest completion percentage. Granted, he's got more games to play, but highest completion percentage again at 68.1. He's thrown one interception every year, single-digit interceptions. 19 touchdowns, 4 interceptions in 16, 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in 17, 29 touchdowns, 8 interceptions last year. He's already at 21 touchdowns and just 1 interception this year, and his highest rating. I see a guy that can make a lot of throws. I see a guy that's got prototypical size and athleticism. And if I'm going to lean on someone else's opinion about the kid, I recently saw a video of Greg Cosell, a very well-respected quarterback film guy, NFL film guy, kind of said that he is a scheme versatile quarterback, and specifically he would be probably the best fit in the Bengals system, in a Rams style offense, a Zac Taylor offense. So for me, I think that kid is probably my favorite. I'm not saying by a lot, but I see plays that are made that not a lot of players make. And to me, that's the guy that I think the Bengals should look very heavily at, especially if they're not the number 1 overall pick. There might be guys might go in front of him, but I think that guy is – I think he could very well end up being the best of the bunch based on the tools you have to work with. I think there's maybe a little bit more work and grooming that need to go with him as he enters the pros. Maybe Burrow is more ready tomorrow than Herbert is, but I think that this is a guy that can make all the throws. I think he's a guy that can maneuver the pocket relatively well. And I think, unlike a Tua, he's got less to work with. If you go back a couple of weeks ago and you watch the game where they absolutely dismantled Colorado, Justin Herbert could have probably had 4 or 5 touchdown passes in that game. Instead, I think he had 2 because players around him were dropping absolute dimes in the end zone that he threw to them. So some of these stats I threw out to you earlier may be a little skewed because of a lack of surrounding talent with him. So to me, those are kind of the arguments as to why I like Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I think that the last game that Herbert played against Washington is a tape that I think you and I are going to watch a lot over the course of this offseason, because it was my first time watching not only Herbert in depth, but also Jacob Eason, who he was going up against. And yeah, I personally I was, again, I was introduced a little bit to Eason, but I personally like a lot of the things that I think people like about Herbert, and how he has a live arm and how he's able to manage to, generate a lot of touch on some of these deep balls and manage to have perfect placement, but also have a lot of velocity with those throws. So like you said, Herbert, his main positive is obviously he can place the ball all over the field. But I think right now you're looking for a quarterback that not only can operate out of structure and not only make throws under imperfect circumstances, but also combine that with the ability to move an offense consistently. And I think that's definitely the thing that Herbert has to work on the most, because you said those accuracy issues popped up last year, and he's still kind of working through those things. And he's probably the most erratic out of these top quarterbacks. Yeah. I think that's definitely the one knock on him. And I guess you can point to Easton as well. So it really is finding that quarterback that has the best combination of efficiency on a per play basis, but also has the components to really break open a game and make these plays now that every quarterback can make. And I guess that's why before the season, I think Tua was everyone's top quarterback in that sense, because, even playing in a stacked offense in Alabama, he was still able to, flash and showcase and display all these, transitional talents and elements of a pocket passer, but also have an arm that can, put the ball all over the field and very quickly while doing it. The reason why Tua wasn't my QB1 right now is because I think you do have to kind of worry about those durability issues, because he played injured a lot last year, even though he played all 15 games, and now he's dealing with an ankle injury. And it's not because he tends to escape the pocket every once in a while, and it's not because he's that small. It's just because it's just kind of what it is right now, and he's going through a lot of injury concerns. This is something that I think the Bengals and every other team is going to have to focus on. Okay, can we trust this guy to stay healthy for most of the time? Because if you're investing into a quarterback and with one of the first 2 picks, that's definitely the biggest concern that you have, is can you rely on this guy to play? And from a talent perspective and from a consistency perspective, and over the course of now 2.5 years or whatever, you love the production and the tape that Tua has shown. But I think it's just the one red flag for me that has him right below Burrow right now. But guys like Herbert and Easton have those elements that make me say, wow, I really wish I had that in my quarterback. It's just about managing their consistency and getting them on pace to manage an offense for the course of 4 quarters.
Yeah, I kind of adopt some parts of, the old Bill Parcells, how to evaluate a college quarterback thing. I look at the chasm between, the differential between touchdowns and interceptions. I look at I look at completion percentage, and then obviously, wins and other things like that are part of it too. So, there's kind of a little formula that he used in terms of evaluating college quarterbacks. I take some of that into stock when I look at some of these guys, and obviously competition, surrounding talent, all that kind of stuff. The one dark horse that we didn't talk about really was Jalen Hurts.
Yes.
A guy that was kind of forgot about because he got benched for Tua. He had, I believe, a true freshman, a great year. He came in, sparked them, I think won a national championship for them, and then got benched for Tua. Now he's in Oklahoma, probably going to win the Heisman this year. So he's a dark horse guy, and it brings up the second part of our conversation here, because we don't know exactly where he's going to go in terms of draft stock. He could be a guy that's maybe a late 1, mid 1, early 2 if teams hold off on quarterbacks. So I've been asked about this one a lot too. You look back to when the Bengals needed a full rebuild in 2011. What did they do? They had just got rid of T.O. and they traded Chad Johnson away. So they needed a wide receiver. Well, the safest pick of the draft, and arguably the best player in the draft at the time, was A.J. Green. Now, granted, that ended up being an absolutely loaded draft class, but A.J. Green, and he ended up being truly a very safe pick. They went wide receiver first, and then they got their quarterback in Andy Dalton at the early second round. We know what that led to. 5 straight postseason berths. They built a team around those two guys, and they were able to carry the baton from the Carson Palmer era. Now, I think we all want the generational talent, which probably there's 1 or 2, if not more, between the names we listed of Burrow, Herbert, Tua, all those guys. But could there be as sage of a strategy, or even a wiser strategy in, get another offensive lineman early, and then top of the second, or trade back toward the top of the first, and if a guy like Jalen Hurts is there, get a Fromm, get an Eason, and work it that way.
So what the Bengals did in 2011, like they watched Cam Newton get taken first overall, and they watched Von Miller get taken second overall. And thinking, okay, and they're thinking, yeah, like we knew those two guys were going to be gone. We're going to take the top guy on our board, and AJ Green. And there was obviously no problem with that, because their evaluations on the other quarterbacks they're taking in the first round, Blaine Gabbert, Jake Locker, Christian Ponder, they're pretty damn accurate if they're going to take Green over those guys. So when you're at the top of the first round, it's not 100% take a quarterback, but it's pretty damn close as long as you have the right guy to take there. When you're talking about the Bengals this year, and they're probably going to be drafting no worse than like the 3rd overall pick.
Right.
If there is the quarterback that they feel confident that can be the guy to take over for Andy Dalton, they cannot pass up on it. And I'm basically going back to a couple weeks ago when I'm saying, if you're drafting in the top 5 and you're this bad, and the reason why you're this bad is because your quarterback play is shoddy, you pretty much have to take a quarterback. If there isn't a quarterback there, compared to a guy like Chase Young, the defensive end from Ohio State, or an Andrew Thomas, the offensive tackle from Georgia, then you would take the safer prospect at a position of need. That's saying, if you feel like guys like, I don't know, Burrow or Herbert or Eason in this case are those Locker, Ponder, and Blaine Gabbert types. At this point right now, I think those quarterbacks this year are safer than those guys, and probably are a better chance to pan out, even if the guys like Young and Thomas are extremely enticing. But when you're dealing with the situation now, when you have complete uncertainty at the quarterback position, and you have guys who you would figure to be not safe, but better overall quality type quarterbacks, you would basically force your hand to take the quarterback in that situation, because you're probably not going to have this opportunity again if you expect to be competitive in the near future, if you expect to be healthier going forward, because you just can't count on continuing to draft in the top 5, even when you're as bad as the Bengals are right now. So if the right quarterback is there in your mind and you're in the position to take him, you basically take the quarterback and worry about the rest later.
So I know it makes for more dramatic podcasting or radio for us to sit here and, butt heads and argue the point. Normally, I'd put up a little bit more of a fight, but I think the scenarios, and I didn't add this, maybe intentionally when I first brought up this question, the scenarios in where the Bengals are in terms of the state of the franchise are different. They had a head coach who had already rebuilt the team once or twice at that point, and they knew that head coach had a philosophy of, well, we can get a pretty good quarterback, make sure we get surrounding talent, and build the team up that way. This is now still a new regime where the quarterback that this head coach inherited may or may not have been the guy that he wanted. So I think, to your point, John, if a guy is there, and to be quite honest, Taylor may be feeling some heat of, if this is a year that's 3-13 or worse, he's got to win games, and he's got to find a guy that's going to win him games. Otherwise, he's going to be out of a job, and he may not get another chance at a head coaching job for quite a while if things don't turn around. So I think if the scenarios were a little different, maybe you could then emulate what happened in 2011. But I think because a young head coach, because he's an offensive-minded guy, because Dalton may or may not be his quarterback that he wanted, I think if there is a guy that he truly covets up there, that is the way that to go, especially if there is a guy, like you said, that they view as the guy.
That's honestly a great point. And to your point, he's got to find a way to win games. The Bengals have to find a way to put butts in seats right now. They're like last in percentage attendance through 7 weeks, and the losing is definitely not helping that. So if you go into this next draft and you're not committed to Andy Dalton beyond 2020, and you're sitting at the top of the first round, and you don't take a quarterback, there's going to be a lot of uproar, even if you take an elite prospect like Chase Young or Andrew Thomas again. But there is, I would say, a section of Bengals fans who are thinking, oh, what if he's going to be Dave Klinger again? What if he's going to be Akili Smith? And you'll have those fans to back you up and say, yeah, take the safe prospect. But again, like I think you made a great point of how Marvin was in a very different spot in his career, and how they had a little bit more of a plan to attack that, I guess, revival of 2011, and how this is pretty much a completely different scenario. Because even if they aren't technically rebuilding, because if they were, they would probably be trading some assets by now. They're in a spot where they really need to restart everything, and that all begins at the quarterback's position, because Andy Dalton in 2020 should be the last year of his time in Cincinnati, and you need to find a way to look forward, and there's no better time to do that than when you're picking in the top 3.
I mean, there are examples of people will point at the 49ers. They did it a different way. They traded for a guy that was originally drafted in the second round in Garoppolo, and they've built a team that's now 6-0, 7-0, 6-0, I think. So, there are anomalies, but that's also a team that just swung a trade for Emmanuel Sanders. That's a team who's done things in free agency, whereas the Bengals are not really that team. So they need to get and hit on guys in the draft. So, to me, I think it's got to be a quarterback. And we talk about the quarterback change. We kind of sound like we dog on Andy Dalton, and I kind of throw this disclaimer out somewhat often. I mean, this isn't
it's not personal.
It's not. It's really not. And I think most fans, based on who Andy Dalton is as a person and what they've seen from him on the field at times, I think they would love to see him succeed. They would love to see it work for him, but it's just not. It's not. And so that's the reality of the situation. We're going to be joined here by Joe McAtee of Turf Show Times. So let's bring him on the air. Is this Joe?
Hey, what's going on, man?
Hey, Joe, what's going on? You're talking with Anthony Cosenza and John Sheeran of the Orange and Black Insider. How you doing, bud?
Doing all right. What's going on, guys?
Well, we're getting. I mean, I think you're probably a little bit more excited about the football season than we are at this point. We obviously are. For the Bengals being 0-7, this week's a little more exciting than many other weeks coming up because they're playing in London and it's a little bit different. And then, of course, the relationship between the two teams. I guess we'll just kind of kick it off with a question about kind of how do you feel the Rams have been looking in general? I mean, it seems like a very up and down season. They obviously traded for Jalen Ramsey and had a good result this past week, but is there a sense of a Super Bowl hangover from the Rams team?
I don't think so. I think the biggest issue has just been the inconsistency, right? You're talking about a team that just dominated the Falcons. The game was 30-3 in the final minutes, and yet this was the same team that could only muster 7 points against the 49ers, and 2 weeks prior to that, they gave up 3 touchdowns in the first 4 possessions to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and yet started off 3-0 with wins over the Saints and the Panthers and the Browns. So I think the biggest problem has just been the inconsistency. I don't like the idea of the Super Bowl hangover. We talked about it a lot on our side throughout the summer, and what's funny is if you go to Wikipedia, and I know it's Wikipedia, but if you look at Wikipedia and look at Super Bowl hangover, it says the Super Bowl hangover may mean one of 3 different things. It's like, okay, well then it doesn't really mean anything if it means 3 different things. I think you're just looking at a team that's had some big personnel changes, especially on the offensive line, and because when you go to the Super Bowl, you get a target on your back, and teams are making sure they play their best football against the Rams right now, and I think they're just trying to work through that, and the results have been pretty inconsistent. Like you said, it's been up and down, and they're just going to have to find a way to get some consistency once they get on the other side of the bye.
Joe, this is John. My main question right now is I'm looking at like the Rams' overall efficiency numbers, and like there has been a regression on the offensive side of the ball. But as far as running the ball, like they're doing pretty well right there. They're 11th in rushing DVOA. They're 7th in success rate. They're a top 11 unit for PFF. And looking at Todd Gurley right now, he's not exactly having the greatest of seasons. And I know he hasn't been all entirely healthy. But as far as what that offensive line is doing, like in terms of run blocking, is there really that big of a difference between how they are performing in the run game compared to pass protection? And how's that run game really been going? Mainly with Malcolm Brown almost being the better runner in that backfield.
Yeah, it's been all over the place. I mean, the first thing I'd say is that in 2018 they were fantastic. If you look at whether you look at Pro Football Focus or you look at some of the other advanced grades, the line last year was probably the best line I've ever seen for the Rams. So the idea that there's a drop off, I don't think is necessarily surprising, especially because they lost the left guard in the center and had to replace them with 2 younger guys in Joseph Noteboom initially and then Brian Allen that hadn't gotten a lot of time. Noteboom has since busted up his knee and he'll be gone for the season, and so the Rams have turned to David Edwards, a 5th-round rookie from the 2019 draft, to try to figure out if he can be a mainstay on the line and get some stability. But I think the bigger issue, the problem with the run game hasn't necessarily been the quality, but maybe the quantity. And for a team that featured Todd Gurley to such a significant degree for years, to pull back on that, I think they're trying to work through whether it's do we preserve Gurley and try to use him late? Do we need to use Malcolm Brown more? Like you said, he's been really good, although he's been around for 5 years. He's been around ever since Todd Gurley joined the team, and he never got the opportunity that, for example, C.J. Anderson got at the end of last year. People might remember him from the NFC Championship and obviously the Super Bowl. Or is it going to be Darrell Henderson, the 3rd-round rookie that the Rams traded up to get, hadn't played much until the last 2 weeks and has looked pretty explosive? A lot of Rams fans are excited to see more out of the rookie if they're not going to get more out of Todd Gurley, which seems to be the case. So I don't know. I mean, the difference between the run blocking, pass blocking hasn't been all that much different because overall the line just hasn't been very good. But they're working through some personnel changes, working on coaching up the youth, and I think it's a work in progress that's going to be more than a 2019 story, especially because somebody you guys know well, Andrew Whitworth, is all but certain to retire after this year, and the Rams are going to be on the hunt for a new left tackle unless they promote somebody from within. But based on how the season has gone, I don't know that a lot of Rams fans would be excited about that possibility.
Talking with Joe McAtee of SB Nation's Turf Show Times. Joe, you are the king of the segue, sir, because between the question my co-host just asked and your mentioning of Andrew Whitworth, that's where I was going next. Bengals fans have a major soft spot for him, never really wanted to see him leave Cincinnati. Some believe that he was going to hit a major decline when he left Cincinnati. Regardless, it seems as if he hasn't. Probably not playing up to a similar level this year, but talk about his overall impact since his arrival in Los Angeles, and maybe what he's done for that offense.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a galvanizing force, and it's the kind of free agency signing that fans usually assume that every free agency signing is. That a guy's going to come in and play that position adequately and make sure that they're a positive force on that side of the ball. That's exactly what Andrew Whitworth's done. He's been a great tackle for a team that, look, if you look at the Rams' history over the last 15 years, ever since, for any Cincinnati fans that might be Ohio State fans, Orlando Pace, when he was our left tackle back during the greatest show on turf, after he got to the end of his career, the Rams struggled to find a successor. They tried Alex Barron coming out of Florida State. That didn't work. They tried Jason Smith with the number 2 overall pick out of Baylor. That didn't work. We signed Jake Long. He was actually responsible for Sam Bradford re-injuring his ACL in 2014. And then, of course, the Rams recently went with Greg Robinson in 2014, drafted him number 2 overall, and that also didn't work. So the Rams have been on the hunt, and this is, again, why that disappearance of Whitworth after this year has a lot of fans concerned, is that the Rams spent 15, 16, 17 years looking for some stability at the position and simply could not get it. And no surprise that between 2004 2016, the Rams didn't have a single winning record. The offenses looked pretty horrible. They couldn't get right on the offensive line, and specifically at left tackle. They did with Andrew Whitworth. And, the fact that his arrival synced up with Sean McVay's, I think you don't necessarily have to ask, was it the personnel changes? Was it McVay arriving? They both happened at the same time, and Andrew Whitworth was a big part of that. And even maybe more importantly, he's been a great steward in the community. I don't know if you guys remember the Monday night game between Los Angeles and Kansas City last year that won the ESB for the best game, but it was happening while we had some pretty massive wildfires in Southern California, and the Whitworths as a family were out in front of it, and he's been a really good steward off the field, and he's kind of the, what you hope when you're signing a free agent. Rams fans have some similar concerns, like you said, that maybe he's so close to the end of his career that the football's going to tail off. But it hadn't really happened the last 2 years. We'll have to see if that happens over the rest of 2019, but to this point, he's been a great signing, and he's probably the kind of guy that most teams wish they had on and off the field.
Joe, I want to talk about the Jalen Ramsey trade. Obviously, the price tag was big to get him 2 first-round picks and a mid-round pick. Me personally, when you're dealing with a player that good at a position that value, the price is always going to be steep. And I don't think, from my personal opinion, the price was not that steep. My whole thing was that maybe the Rams may not be the best team to do this, considering how much they have invested right now in the quarterback and also their running back over the next couple of years. What are your thoughts on the Jalen Ramsey trade from the short term and also the long term perspective? And do you think that the Rams were in the best position to make a deal like this?
Yeah, I think they're going to have to play their way to find out whether they were or not, right? Because part of what we're saying is, if this is a team that's kind of in win-now mode, to give up so much value in your future to try to maximize your chances to win now like they did last year, but to do so again depends on winning now, right? One of the things we wrote last year was that, okay, the Rams traded all this stuff for Marcus Peters and Aqib Talib and signed Ndamukong Suh, traded away a first-round pick for Brandon Cooks. It was kind of a Super Bowl or bust type attempt. Well, they went to the Super Bowl, right? And so the strategy kind of paid off because they were able to make it. So I think part of the process is going to be, is Jalen Ramsey going to give us Pro Bowl caliber, and for seasons to come, if it's not Pro Bowl adjacent caliber football, he's going to have to for this trade to come anywhere close to making sense. I think the other issue is, and this is one where it gets a bit wonky when you talk about long-term payoff and dividend, is the timeline. The Rams gave up a 2020 and 2021 first-round pick. So even if the CBA holds and your 2021 first-round pick gets a fifth-year option, you're talking about a pick that's going to be on that team through the year 2025. That is so far out in the future. I can't imagine what the Rams are going to let, or even the NFL or America. I have no idea what's going to be happening in 2025. That's so far off. Jalen Ramsey is only under contract through next season. So clearly the Rams are going to have to give him a contract extension. They're already on the books for about $100 million for 6 of their top guys when you look at Jared Goff, Todd Gurley, Rob Havenstein, right tackle, Brandon Cook, some of these major deals that they've already given out, Aaron Donald, obviously. So they didn't have a ton of room to work with moving forward into next year. Now they're going to have to add to that with a Jalen Ramsey contract, and they don't have any first-round picks and haven't had one for 3 years under Sean McVay to restock this roster. They're pretty much going all in on the guys they've got, and the only way to really know whether or not it's been worth it is whatever results they get over the next 3-4 years with those guys that they put the contracts on.
Talking with Joe McAtee at Turf Show Times, the SB Nation Los Angeles Rams website. We'll be talking with him for just a couple more minutes here. Appreciate the time here, Joe. I think I would be remiss if I guess I'm just Mr. Rams Bengals relationship here, but I guess I would be remiss if I didn't get the Rams side of the fence opinion on Zac Taylor. Obviously, he made a very big jump from offensive assistant to head coach. Is how much of this was, you know what, this kid really was an integral part of what the Rams offense did last year and deserves this shot, and how much of it was kind of riding the coattails on Sean McVay and the NFL being enamored with McVay's effect on the Rams?
Yeah, it's hard to tell because he was only with us for a season, right? And so we didn't get there wasn't a big enough sample size to really get a sense of how much he was changing and how much was just, Jared Goff maturing and how much was McVay's play calling and how much was, for example, adding Brandon Cooks instead of Sammy Watkins. I don't know. It's really hard to say. And again, for last year when we had the best line play that we've had, how much was a factor of the offensive line simply dominating some games and allowing the passing offense to flourish? It's hard to say. I think that the thing you'd look at, whether it's Zac Taylor or some of the other guys around the league, I think clearly this is a league that isn't necessarily tied to experience anymore, right? Where you're seeing teams that are more willing to go after a younger, inexperienced guy than being afraid to fail with, and obviously I'm biased here, somebody like Jeff Fisher, right? I think there are a lot of teams that look at that kind of hire and say, yeah, there's no reason to swing for a comfortable single when you can swing for a home run. You might strike out, but it's worth it swinging because the alternative isn't much better anyway. And so I think that might be the Sean McVay effect, not necessarily what Zac Taylor might have learned from Sean McVay or offensive principles that he might bring over. I don't know that that's necessarily what teams are looking at, but more that a guy like Zac Taylor, depending on how he interviewed and depending on his vision for you guys and what he sold the team on, that there's no reason to be afraid to hire a guy that young and inexperienced versus to trying somebody that's tried and true that maybe isn't necessarily going to bring in any better results anyway.
Well, are you going to London? Are you in London this week?
I'm not, man. I thought about going, but I actually live in Dallas. I grew up here, moved back here last year, and my mom's place got wrecked by the tornado. So while I was thinking about going out there after these last couple of days, I'm staying here and trying to clean up the neighborhood, and we'll watch it. But it's going to be an interesting game. Are you guys going to London? Have you been to a London game before?
No, I'm actually a little more bitter about this game than most because this game was scheduled to be in LA and I live in Southern California, so I was going to go to it, but then they moved it to London. So, and then my colleague John, were you thinking about going?
I'm 1 year out of college. I don't have that capital on me.
All right. So, no, on our end, but we do know a lot of our Bengals brethren that are out there. What we had a question in our YouTube chat. What are some thoughts from you as we close up here? What are some thoughts from you in terms of keys to this game and what the Rams are looking to achieve against a team that's been winless? Is it just get up early and get on them early and kind of keep on them, or is there specific things they're looking to exploit? What do you think?
Yeah, it's not as much get up on them early. That hasn't been the way that teams that have been struggling that the Rams have taken advantage of have played out, whether it's Arizona last year or obviously Atlanta last week or the Colts back in 2017. When the Rams have had these kind of games, it's been more methodical and been, more about just being disciplined defensively and getting 3 and outs and then just putting up points to the point that, a field goal here, a touchdown here, 2 field goals there, and all of a sudden it's 16-0 late in the second. And you can see the team starting to get the pressure of being down like that, and they start making mistakes. And that's been really the MO for the Rams. It hasn't been what the Buccaneers did to us back in week 4 where, you score 3 touchdowns in the first 4 possessions and you throw out the game plan because nobody expected that to happen. That hasn't really been the way the Rams play these games. If we're looking at keys for the game, obviously number 1's going to be the Rams offensive line. They've been all over the place, and when they've been bad, they've been really, really bad. And obviously that makes it hard to run any kind of offense, let alone one that's already handicapping Todd Gurley by limiting his carries. And for all the skills that Jared Goff has in his bag, he struggled against pressure more so than his peers and to a larger degree than his peers. So I look at the offensive line against y'all's defensive front first, obviously depending on what the injury report holds, because I saw that earlier today. And then number two, the other key would be the Rams secondary as a whole. They've had so many changes. Akeem Talib's on IR. Yeah. Marcus Peters is now a Baltimore Raven, but Jalen Ramsey's in. We might have another injury with Troy Hill, who's actually the primary backup and would have started across from Ramsey. So we'll have to see if he's able to go. He didn't practice today. And then you've got some new faces at the back with Taylor Rapp, a rookie who plays kind of an overhang safety role, and Marquis Christian, who's had to come in for John Johnson, a Pro Bowl caliber safety who's on injured reserve. Got some new names back there, and seeing how they all work together along with Eric Weddle, who, end of a Hall of Fame career. It's going to be interesting to see how these guys gel now that it looks like this is going to be the personnel base for the next month or so. Going to be interesting to see those guys, but it's a really talented unit, and when you got Aaron Donald at the front, you're getting enough pressure on a consistent basis, and the secondary plus Aaron Donald has been good enough to limit some really good offenses. And if they can do that again on Sunday, I think it's going to be difficult for you guys to move the ball, which has been the case for some teams. And that's been really the way the Rams put the screws on it.
Yeah, Troy Hill, another former Bengal. Quickly, got a prediction, score prediction or anything?
I'll go with something similar to last week, if only because the Rams lost those 3 in a row. They don't have the opportunity to drop any more games because they're going to lose some games to some really good teams when they come out of the bye. They've got first Pittsburgh, but then they got Chicago and Baltimore. They've got rematches against Seattle and San Francisco. They got to travel to Dallas late in the season. I think we're at the point where the coaches have put it on these guys, and maybe some of the leaders in the locker room, guys like Whitworth and Eric Weddle, and maybe to a degree Aaron Donald, that say, look, you can't get blindsided the way we did against Tampa Bay. That's just not acceptable. They've got to come out and they've got to be cleaner the way they were against Atlanta in the first half. I'd expect that. But, like I said, the story of the Rams is inconsistency over the course of 2019. I wouldn't be surprised if we get into a shootout in the first half and you guys are feeling really good about it. But if I had to go with a prediction, I'd go with something like 35-17 maybe with a late touchdown for you guys. But honestly, nothing would surprise me about the 2019 Rams. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's 35-17 the other direction.
Good stuff, Joe. How can our listeners check out your stuff, get in touch with you, or follow you on social media, all that good stuff?
Yeah, just hit us up on Turf Show Times, at Turf Show Times on Twitter, Turf Show Times on Instagram. We're not doing TikTok yet. We're old men.
Neither am I.
We're nowhere cool enough to do Twitch yet. So we'll get there one day. But right now it's just on the site, Twitter, Instagram. That's as cool as we get.
Cool. Well, to echo some of our listeners' sentiments, take care of your mom and that situation down there. Hope all's well, man, and enjoy this weekend.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for the time, bud. Joe McAtee from Turf Show Times, and that interview, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, our interviews are brought to you by a specific sponsor, Casabel Real Estate. Go to CasabelRealtyGroup.com for your Southern California real estate needs, information, listings, all that good stuff. Check out CasabelRealtyGroup.com. They are the ones who sponsored that interview. Good stuff from Joe there. Very informative, and it's been an interesting year for the Rams. Very roller coastery, right?
Mm-hmm. Turf Show Times is an elite SB Nation website. Elite name as well. Great name.
It is a great name. We're going to get out of here. We've gone a little long. Any final thoughts, Sean? I know I wanted to give you a little time to maybe clear some things up. I don't know if you want to use this opportunity for that. You've caught some flack this week, my friend, on a number of different fronts. I don't know. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to talk about that, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, if you've got some final thoughts about the game or anything else, go for it.
Yeah, this is the time where you can, I guess, close out of that podcast application if you want, but I'll just make this brief. I got into a discussion earlier this week about the Bengals and the state of the franchise and how they can get better. And essentially the conversation, twisted or shifted towards basically what would happen if the Bengals move and would we be okay with that? And my overall thought right now is that, here, hold on a second. There's a picture of me as about a 13-year-old at Bengals training camp. That's actually Roy Williams in the background. These are my two friends, childhood friends of mine, who got me into liking the Bengals from a very early age. I'm a Bengals fan, or was a diehard Bengals fan, a lot like you guys. But it's just that over the years, I've just, developed into more of a conscious, not blind and deaf person who worships the organization. So when I contemplate the fact of if the Bengals were to get better by moving the organization outside of Cincinnati, I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world. That's essentially what the conversation basically shifted to. And there was this big Bengals fan who basically painted me as an enemy of the city or an enemy of the Bengals or whatever. So my whole thing is that, when discussing with people who are just so devoted to the organization and who are basically too far gone into their values about this organization and this team in general, it's not exactly the most productive conversation that you can have. And it's all very moot because the Bengals are here for, I think, until 2026 when that stadium deal is going for. And as long as the Browns and the Blackburns own the team, I don't think the team is moving anywhere. But it's all about progress, man. It's all about making the sport better. And I think the sport is better with more competent franchises. And I would hope that the Bengals once again become competent in the city of Cincinnati. But in general, from my perspective, if they happen to move and they happen to get better outside of Cincinnati, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for the team or the city. That's essentially what that amounted to, but it's no big deal. It's all moot anyways.
Well, I think we all would love to see the Bengals stay in Cincinnati, succeed. The entire thing. I put up a post that centered around the post game reactions of this week. That they are not a well run business. They're not a well-run business, and unfortunately, that it's not just wins and losses, guys. It's not just the wins and losses. It permeates through an organization, and employees get disgruntled. That's why you have guys coming out years later talking about the jockstrap stuff. That's why you have guys coming out and agents talking about how difficult it is to have. And granted, we could go on a whole podcast episode about this, but agents talking about how it's one of the worst franchises to deal with in terms of contract negotiations. At some point, you got to call a spade, and you got to say, look, these are the realities that you deal with this team, and it's no surprise that these frustrating organizational practices are directly correlating to the lack of success on the field. And you have the way they operate, you have guys, your best players, even if they're getting paid very well, they want out. They don't want to play for this team anymore. And it happened with, to a lesser degree, Chad Johnson, but it happened with Carson Palmer. It happened with Carl Pickens. It happened with Corey Dillon. They got sick of it. It happened with Takeo Spikes. You can go back to Lamar Parrish. He didn't like things when Paul Brown was running the franchise. So when these seasons pop, when they're 11-5 and they're winning division titles, it's easy to sit here and be like, they're up there with the big boys. But when these seasons crop up, and now we're on the precipice of the fourth losing season in a row here with a new coaching staff, it's easy to point out the flaws. And I understand that some of these, and some of the guys I saw you interacting with, I've met them. I met them in Seattle. They're great, great people. And I understand that they want that team there, and they want to root for the team, and they want to see it successful, and they root for them win or lose. I think we all do that. But the problem is the losing gets old. The losing gets old, the way they lose, and their lack of really doing cutting of corners, if you will, or however you want to word it. It maddens people. And I think, I don't want to speak for you in saying that, but I'm sure that that's part of where your argument's coming from.
Essentially, it was if things happen to the point where the Bengals need to change things, it would basically lead to a point where the NFL might force their hand to basically leave the city of Cincinnati. And if they leave the city of Cincinnati is probably not going to get another NFL franchise. I don't want it to come to that because I think a lot of people would be upset and it would change the city drastically. And I know the Bengals have done things to spark the city of Cincinnati and rebuild that riverfront area. But at the end of the day, it's football. It's a game. It's a team. People will get over it. It's not the worst thing in the world if it happens. I don't want it to happen. I would want the best thing to happen for the game that I love covering and I love watching. That's basically all I have to say about it.
Yeah. It's an exhausting topic, and unfortunately one that, it comes up in seasons like this. And, like I said at the beginning of the show, unfortunately, it turns into a kill the messenger situation, and that's what happens when frustrations are kind of misplaced and whatever. But we're going to keep giving you our opinions. We're going to keep giving you this show. We're going to keep giving you stuff on CincyJungle.com. So keep it there. And As for this show, get it on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, Megaphone, wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to get the videos, both of our live podcasts and all of that. I do want to, again, remind everybody that we're going to do a listener questions episode on Friday afternoon, so please join us for that. We will also be joined briefly by Bengals UK, the Bengals UK account. They're going to be talking about some sights and sounds and everything from London, which should be pretty cool. I think the representative from them will be calling us from a London pub, which is pretty cool. So check that out. We think it's going to be a lot of fun. We appreciate all the support. We're running long. John, thanks for everything, bud. Have a good rest of the week, and we'll talk Friday, I guess.
Yeah, happy Halloween to you, man.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. See you, everybody.